Howdy y'all. No Man's Sky isn't exactly renowned for its combat encounters. While combat has always been one of the main pillars of the game, it's mostly optional, especially these days. However, if you're like me, fighting aliens and space robots is essential to the sci-fi fantasy that the game promises. So let's see what kind of combat gameplay No Man's Sky has to offer. I'm Kanaju. These are the 8 toughest enemy encounters in No Man's Sky. Now, before I begin, and before you put in the comments below, I know, No Man's Sky is not a difficult game. And once you upgrade your exosuit, multi-tool, and starship high enough, practically nothing will threaten you, at all. I get it. Hello Games definitely need to add more endgame content for high-level players. I beg of them, please, but until then, here's the list. Number 8, Derelict Freighter Security. We're starting light with the automated security present on some of the procedural Derelict freighters. Due to the procedural nature of these encounters, I'm including this in its toughest variation, which is a room full of ceiling turrets and security drones. Ceiling turrets have a ton of health and a quick rate of fire, however their shots are easily blocked with a personal force field. On top of that, unless you walk directly into their spotlight, they won't attack, making them pretty simple to avoid. The security drones have medium health and deal medium damage, but their rate of fire is pretty slow. Independently, neither of those two things are much of a threat at all. However, a room full of them can overwhelm a player, as fighting the drones can activate the turrets remotely. With multiple turrets and drones firing at once, your personal force field isn't very useful, and the smart tactic becomes running out of the room in order to consolidate fire and targets. Still, I wouldn't expect too many players to actually die by freighter security unless they're severely underpowered. Number 7, the Swarm. Another Derelict freighter enemy, the Swarm is a nest that, once disturbed, spawns an ambush of little aliens. Like the security turrets, these can be avoided using stealth. However, once awakened, even a single swarm can be troublesome for low-powered players. Minifiends move quickly and can climb on walls and ceilings. They'll often surround a player, dealing damage from outside your field of view. And while they have very little health, their speed, numbers, and rate of fire mean that they can deal a fair amount of damage quite quickly. On top of that, they will follow you to other rooms if you attempt to seek cover or to regroup. A single swarm is mostly still just a nuisance. However, a room full of nests can lead to a domino effect, as your weapons and backpedaling inevitably awaken more nests and create more enemies. Fighting multiple swarms at once with poor shield tech can be quite risky indeed. Number 6, Biological Horrors. Triggered by trying to steal the larval core from a whispering egg, the swarm of biological horrors that burrow up from the ground to stop you are quite a formidable enemy as far as this game goes. Unlike the swarms on Derelict freighters, instead of a set number of monstrosities spawning, they come in waves for a set duration of time. So until that timer's up, you're on the clock, fighting sometimes dozens of the monsters. While they can shoot acid to damage you at a distance, biological horrors are fast enough to attack you directly. Their lunge attacks are surprisingly effective, dealing a fair amount of damage and often throwing you back a distance. Their speed and ability to pop up from anywhere underground means you'll often be flanked if you're not careful. Considering newer players will likely encounter a whispering egg early on in their travels, I imagine plenty of you have stories of fighting your first swarm of biological horrors. I remember almost getting my ass whooped after Next, as all of my upgrades were made obsolete by the update, meaning I took them on with the equivalent of a pea shooter. Luckily I had a friend with me though. Fun times. Now, what makes them less dangerous are the various exploits people have come up with in order to avoid fighting them. Digging a hole under their nests, climbing onto buildings, getting in an exocraft or starship. And while these exploits do nullify the danger, you have to admit, an enemy that causes players to run and hide rather than fight head-on must be pretty threatening indeed. Number 5, Titan Worm Burrow. While the Titan sandworms that burrow across the galaxy are too powerful for players to challenge, their children offer some variety for the combat inclined. Found on infested planets, Titan worm burrows are home to hungering tendrils, or Titan worm larvae. Tiny compared to their parents, but not to us. These massive babies have lightning-fast lunge attacks that can damage you quickly if you get too close. However, they don't have any ranged attacks or a way of moving around, making it pretty easy to step back and shoot them from a distance once they reveal themselves. Honestly, I always felt like this was a compromise on Hello Games' part. Their mouths are dripping with acid, implying an acid spit attack, and they're fully animated for popping in and out of the ground. Surely they were planned to have more challenging attack patterns at some point. At least, that's what I imagined, but sadly, they're more like fish in a barrel. At least they were originally. You see, when the Endurance update added them back into the game, it included one small change. When disturbing a Titan Worm burrow, you also trigger a swarm of biological horrors. This combo encounter is actually a lot of fun, especially when trying to collect the vile spawn that they drop. Since these disappear quickly and require you to stop shooting as you collect them, you're forced to stay near to the tendrils, and it gives the swarm an opportunity to jump you. It's a fun encounter that requires a little bit more from the player, which I appreciate. Number 4. Pirate Ambush. Yes, I know, pirates aren't that tough, especially in small numbers. So for this list, I'm only referring to the largest pirate encounters, or hunts if you're undertaking a mission of some kind. So when faced alone, a squadron of pirate starships requires not only careful piloting, but strong weapons as well. Since pirates often pull off maneuvers that players can't, they can be difficult to hit. Meanwhile, their buddies are whittling down your shields or health. Since they don't take turns, managing your shield charge becomes an important skill. Figuring out when to line up your shots to deal actual damage and prevent their shields from recharging is also part of the fun. Of course, if you're using autopilot, this will be much easier. And if you're one of those people who just uses an overpowered positron ejector at close range, well, then you might as well just disable pirates altogether, because that weapon's completely overpowered. Broken, I'd say, but for most players, a multi-wave assault of high-level pirates is certainly a challenge. And, without a doubt, many low-level players have died and lost their cargo to such attacks. So, now we're at number 3, and you've probably noticed we haven't talked about the Sentinels yet. So, let's talk about them. Number 3, Space Sentinels. Whether you accidentally shot the space station, accidentally shot a freighter, or accidentally shot a starship, the Sentinels are coming for your ass. In space, they rely on their Sentinel starship fighters to overwhelm and destroy threats. Much like the Sentinels on the ground, they'll attack in waves, with each wave adding more Sentinel fighters to the attack. I'd say these Sentinels are tougher than pirates on average, so it's not exactly a walk in the park. To top it off, level 5 summons a Sentinel Carrier, a dreadnought which spawns more Sentinel fighters and is absolutely covered in high damage turrets. Seriously, if you just try to attack its broadside head-on, you're going to be cut to shreds. Strafing runs tend to work better. Once all of the turrets are disabled and fighters destroyed, you may think the battle over. After all, that's how every other combat encounter works. However, that's not how Space Sentinels handle things. Instead, they'll simply send another carrier, and another. The only way to actually end the encounter is to escape. So far, it's the best challenge No Man's Sky offers fighter pilots, with the exception of maybe number 1 on this list. So, number 2, Sentinel Ground Forces. Whether you're breaking into a secure facility, destroying a resource depot, or simply minding your own damn business, you'll eventually have to contend with the most famous enemies in the game, the iconic Sentinel Ground Forces. Regular drones, repair drones, summoner drones, mechs, and more. The Sentinels are the most common combat encounter in the game. But luckily for us, they're also the most intricate. Sentinel drones are the basic unit, slow rate of fire, medium damage, more of a nuisance than anything else. Then you have the repair drones. They won't hurt you so much as undo the hurt you cause. Summoner drones summon reinforcements to the battlefield, unless you take them out first. And heavy combat drones are proficient in a wide variety of weaponry. They can switch weapons depending on the situation, scattershot for close range, and laser bolts or plasma grenades at any range. High damage and good armor make them quite formidable. Combine all of these units together, and you have a combat puzzle to solve, figuring out which drones to take out in which order. Oh yeah, and they can lay down cover too. So, that's already the most intricate enemy encounter in the game, right? But it gets better. At level 3, Sentinel quadrupeds join the fight. These aggressive robots fire an accurate laser that deals good damage. They also have a great lunge attack. Their armor is quite strong, often requiring multiple clips to dispatch, and leaving room for repair drones to get to work. As tough as they are though, they're nowhere near as tough as Sentinel Hardframes, the mechs that join the battle at level 4. These heavily armored Goliaths feature rapid-fire lasers, powerful flamethrowers, and deadly plasma grenades. Their health, weapons, and aggressive tactics would already be enough to contend with, but they're also the most mobile of the Sentinels. They can jump from one side of the battlefield to the other in seconds, making them difficult to outmaneuver or outrun. I always bring a hard frame of my own to keep them occupied, as they're quite the opponent otherwise. Finally, at level 5, you have the iconic Sentinel Walker. These lumbering bipeds are the most formidable Sentinels in the game. Well, they're supposed to be anyways. They have tons of health and armor and high damage lasers similar to the quads. The reason I don't consider them to be that tough is because it's possible to stagger them by targeting their legs. This gives you plenty of opportunity to reload, heal, or deal damage. They're also the only multi-stage boss battle in the game. However, their second and third stages are actually easier than the first. Their second stage has them stand in place while firing a volley of grenades into the air. These rarely ever hit, and the walker is an easy target while it's happening. The final stage has the walker firing rapid-fire lasers. These do a lot of damage, but the walker doesn't lead at shots, making it really easy to dodge by just walking to the side. This final stage is a cakewalk. I actually find the Hardframe mech to be a more dynamic and challenging enemy, which is why I always target it before the walker in these situations. Altogether though, the Sentinel ground forces are a formidable enemy. Without overpowered weapons, a full engagement from level 1 to 5 can last from like 10 to 20 minutes. I always enjoy these battles and they're easily my favorite in the game. I wish we had more new encounters like this. Hopefully we'll see some in 2023. So, this video is titled The Toughest Enemy Encounters in the game. So, what could be tougher than Sentinels, you might wonder? Number 1. Asteroid Larvae. Yep, these bad boys can attack and damage you indefinitely. While I've never been able to take one down, they're pretty much invincible. So technically they are the toughest enemy in the game, but I mean, let's be real. That's not a very good number 1. So what else is tougher than a Sentinel, you might be wondering? Number 1. Player killers. That's right. If you're brave or foolish enough to leave PvP enabled, then you know the real toughest enemy in the game. Your fellow traveler. Player killers love to beef up their equipment to broken levels in order to grief non-violent players as much as possible. Why, you may ask? No idea. They're probably bored or something. They're most prevalent during expeditions in which everyone starts on the same planet and PvP settings are defaulted to on. Combine that with players' new low-level characters at the start, and you have a recipe for griefing. Of course, if you're looking to test your mettle against these toughest of foes, there are friendly PvP leagues which organize arena battles and tournaments. There are also friendly PvPers who protect expedition rendezvous sites from malevolent players. Really noble stuff. But that concludes my list of the 8 toughest enemy encounters in No Man's Sky. All of it depends on proc gen and your personal weapons and armor, of course, but in general, I think it's a fair list. But what do you think? Let me know your thoughts on the game's combat gameplay in the comments below. Surely it could use some work, but it's come a long way from the bare bones combat we had year 1. And if you enjoyed the video, please consider leaving a like for my efforts. I'm rebalancing my work schedule to prioritize this channel and game development this year, so every little bit of support helps. And if you haven't already, check out my latest video explaining the lore of the No Man's Sky universe, as told through character backstories. I promise it's one of my best. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!